The world know that places on bodies of water frequently have high-speed ferry service, and they're iconic. They're known for it. Sydney, New York, San Francisco, Vancouver, Seattle, Hong Kong. It's widespread in Europe, and it's been a long time wonder about why we don't do it here. Way long ago, when my kids were Mayor Buckhorn's age, well, they were real. The Commuter Rail Authority was tasked for looking at high-speed ferry service, and we didn't know what to do about it. T-BARTA has included it in its master plan. Through the efforts of Congressman Castor and Congressman Bilirakis, they floated the notion of looking at a Hillsborough County waterborne transportation feasibility and demonstration project, and got a congressional earmark to Hillsborough County to figure out whether this could be done. So there's $475,000 of federal funds out there waiting to figure out if it has a home. The MPO, and Ray Charmante is here today, did 2 successive studies. The first one looked at all the different routes in the Tampa Bay area and said if there's a place that it can happen, it's between South County and McDill. And the second study did an in-depth, exhaustive look at the feasibility of commuter service between South County and McDill Air Force Base. And it had a wealth of data in it. It showed where the employees live. There are 5,336 employees at McDill who live south of the Alafia River. They commute between 22 and 35 miles one way each day. Whereas across the bay it's 6 miles to McDill. The study found that a high-speed ferry, this was water taxi, would cut travel time 11 to 15 minutes. Importantly, about 3,600 people of those residents are crowding on our roadways coming through downtown Tampa, going to to McDill Air Force Base in just 1 hour. And 5,300 are moving in a basically 90-minute period. So there's a lot of traffic congestion, a lot of people moving, and when they get there, there's a 10-minute wait at the gate that can reach, as those of you who have been there know, about 1.5 miles long. On average, the South County McDill employee spends $245 a month in making that commute. The survey the MPO did found that 87% of McDill employees who lived in South County would in fact use such a service. And then we all get the lifestyle advantage. Would you rather watch a sailboat or would you rather be stuck in traffic? The problem is that the MPO study looked at how you could do it. And it developed a business concept and came away with the conclusion that while there's a market there, anything that you would do there would require substantial operating subsidies. They found a site that had limited parking, that had used small vessels that didn't lift many people, that were weather prone. And it was at the point when all this study came out that people didn't quite know what to do about that. And that's kind of where Ackerman Centerfit came in. Our public policy group, supported by our corporate practice group and land use folks and our Washington, D.C. office, started looking at this and started to devise a way that this might work. And people like Richard Pinsky helped, and David Doney was part of that, and Vic Golbus. And you need to know that the only reason we're here today is the Ackerman Centerfit has made a pretty significant investment in trying to do something that would work, that makes sense in this market. We identified that whatever had to happen could not have any state or local operating subsidies because there was no money for that. We determined it had to carry large volumes of people, and it had to solve the last mile, the first mile issue, meaning door to door. When you drop people off McDill, what happens? How do people get there? So those are all really important concepts, and we developed kind of a model for that. And frankly, started a confidential search around the country for ferry operators that we might interested in the Tampa Bay area. So we were kind of acting as an economic development arm of the community. We had some discussions with some of the county commissioners, and so pleased that Commissioner Merman's here at the very front end. She said, this is a great project. Hope that this would happen. And in the course of it, we met And as we talked to operators, they said, no, we don't do that. No, we won't take that risk. Are you crazy? They said, why don't you talk to Greg Dronkard in HMS? So one day we darkened his door by virtue of the phone call and said, hey, you know, we think this can work. What do you think? And he'll tell you a bit about their due diligence, but in the process, worked through a lot of issues and brought other team members on, like Shada Ecological Services, Tom Reese is here today, Moffitt and Nichols, to just try to figure out how do you put all these pieces of the puzzle together to get something that might work in this community, that the community would say, this is a great idea, let's go do it. And that's kind of where we are in what we're presenting today. So without further ado, I'd like to turn the mic over to Greg Dronkard and Mark Fernandez. Greg is the president of HMS Ferries. Mark Fernandez is a special operations and special ops, is like a DIL kind of thing. He works on special projects to talk about what they found and kind of the approach that we have. You should know that this all culminated in a very specific economic development proposal that we did early on. Again, we met with Commissioner Merman and said, you know, what do you think we should do? How should we handle it? He said, you need to go talk to Mike Merrill. So we went and talked to Mike Merrill and said, well, how do you think we should pursue this? He said, well, first of all, this is a really powerful project. You need to file this as an economic development project so we can continue the discussion to figure out how to potentially bring this project forward. So that's kind of where it stands right now. But again, I'll go to Greg, and he's going to tell you about his company and the conceptualization of how we can do something extraordinary for the Tampa Bay area. Greg Dronkard, welcome.
Okay, thanks a lot, Ed. Good morning. Thank you to the Tampa Bay Forum Times Forum and to the Chamber. Really appreciate it. And what a great turnout. You can see why we're here, right? I mean, when I got the call from Ed, we get a lot of solicitations, if you will, about projects, because we do a lot of transportation around the United States. And we, frankly, look at all of them. We go out and we investigate projects, and we're generally skeptical on projects. But Ed's enthusiasm and the facts have brought us here today. And what we have found is that Tampa Bay is ripe for this kind of service. And we like to think of ourselves as experts in marine transportation. When I was a kid, my dad said to me, son, the Dutch are the greatest mariners in history, in his thick Dutch accent. and I asked him, well, why is that, Pop? And he said, because they have the most ships at the bottom of the sea. Right? I didn't get it either. But I told all my friends, and I passed it on as fact. But now years later, after running many ships over many miles, what Dad meant was, if you do it enough, you become experts. Now, thankfully, we haven't put any ships at the bottom of the sea, which really puts his whole hypotheses to question. But in any event, we as experts believe that this is the right community and this is the right kind of service. So our company, we do international vessel management and marine transportation, and we're really in several segments of that industry. We operate passenger and car ferries, and we do that primarily for public entities, state transportation entities, transit entities, ports, cities. We operate excursion and specialty vessels. We do that both for private sector companies and on our own. We, many years ago, it seems like many years ago, in the 90s, became experts in high-speed craft. This is a technology that came really out of Australia. It's very prevalent in Europe. And in the US, we were the first operators to become type rated, which is a special certification to operate high-speed ferries. We're also certified by the Coast Guard to train mariners for operation of high-speed ferries. So we're, if you will, subject matter experts in high-speed ferries, and we operate them for the US government. We do other government contracting. We have a number of contracts here in Florida, actually. We are in Key West, we're at Panama City, Dania Point, Jacksonville, and Fort Lauderdale. So we do a Department of Defense contracting, really base support It's all maritime related though. And then for some reason we got into the cruise boat industry. And last year we took a vessel that was with the US government. It had been with a company that failed. The vessel was guaranteed by the US government. It was returned to MARAD, the Maritime Administration, and we purchased the vessel from the government and we've put it back into service. And we're really, really proud of this project. It's a vessel that otherwise might have gone to scrap or been sold overseas. She's now employs, we have about 350 employees in that business unit. We operate all up and down the Mississippi River. We're adding a second vessel next year on the Columbia River. It's an exciting project. We're really proud of it. It's really a U.S. Americana project. But maybe the point there is we're used to standing projects up. We know what it takes to put them together. We have affiliate companies we're proud of. We operate Statue Cruises. We now operate the ferries to Statue of Liberty. It was Circle Lines for about 50 years. We've been doing that for the last 2 years. As you know, Hurricane Sandy came through. The statue's down right now, actually. Planned to open July 4th. That's a very exciting project. We operate Alcatraz to Alcatraz Island for the National Park Service. That's another park concession. That's a 10-year contract, and we're about halfway through that. And we just landed Niagara Falls, so really iconic projects. We're really proud of these. That's a different business unit than the ferry division, but perhaps my point is that it's in our DNA. This hospitality, vessel operations, standing up projects. It's really what we do. And we're a privately held company. We're closely held. There's a handful of executive managers that are owners of the company, and we're all mariners. And we grew up in the industry, and we started a company, and we've grown this company. And our strength is we're operators first. We really identify with the operations, and we do our homework. So, last year we carried over 16 million people. And if you look at some of the biggest ferry systems in the world, that would be equal to, like Washington State ferries. It's a substantial number of people. We do it in a safe, reliable, and efficient manner, and it's part of who we are. So there's a little graphic. It shows a little bit of a footprint here in Florida of our company. So we'd like to think that we're not outsiders. We're doing business in Florida. We've been in Florida for over 20 years. So we're going to transition here. We're going to talk a little bit about the operating strategy of these vessels. Ed pointed out a couple of things. There have been studies. So some of the things that have drawn us into this project, as we did our due diligence, is we look for elements of success for a ferry project. Obviously, geography and the landmass and the water are a key issue. So Tampa Bay is naturally configured for marine transportation. Obviously, you have bridges now that have superseded or replaced what used to be ferry routes. The other thing is population density is something we look at. We look at public participation and public interest in projects. Other key issues are how you link to your upland connections, your transit, established transit routes. One of the key things that we found on this project was many of those elements were there, except there was this question of how are you going to operate the ferry. Normally, ferry vessels don't pay their own way. A transit ferry doesn't normally pay its own way. And so that makes it a challenge. They're normally subsidized. I'll get to why we think that this route is viable, though. So the general strategy here is larger vessels, shallow draft because of the depths in the bay. They're catamarans. Those are lighter, higher speed vessels. They're very stable. Seating capacity, we think a minimum of 250 to 300 is what we've been modeling, up to 600 per vessel. It would be multiple vessels. You would at least would want to operate with 2, but as many as 3, maybe 4, depending on the ultimate demand. These vessels can operate at speeds up to 35 knots. That's not necessarily our final modeled operating speed right now, but they have that kind of capacity. Weatherproof, if you will. These are coastal or offshore vessels. Operating within Tampa Bay would be well within their comfort and safe operating parameters. All trade in the United States, so the vessels have to be built in the United States. Certainly the work is done in U.S. shipyards. So that's the general idea of the vessels that would be used on this. You can see the route, that's the green line. That's Hillsborough County. It shows the graphic that Ed put up, which showed the various potential riders that are moving to MacDill. And the green line is the ferry route. It's about 6 miles across there. Driving around is 20 some odd miles. And so there's a pretty significant difference in just mileage, but certainly congestion is the key issue that a driver is up against when they commute to MacDill. So why MacDill, right? Why are we focusing on MacDill? Well, first off, the study focused on MacDill as well, so it's a logical place for us to look or to analyze. As we looked at this, the population density in Hillsborough County is not as dense as we would normally be looking for a viable, self-sustaining ferry service. But the fact that this is a captured market, if you will, that there's an identifiable group of riders, there's identifiable demand, and as we investigated this with their command structure at MacDill, that are likely to convert over to the ferry, makes the likelihood of a sufficient number of those riders to come over to pay the operating costs very high. So we have a high level of confidence that there will be sufficient riders due to the targeting of that particular market. We're thinking of about 30-minute headways. That means when it leaves one location and then leaves the other, the transit time is about 20 minutes. That's what's currently modeled. It's at the commute periods, which is early morning and afternoon. Not likely to run midday, but depending on demand, one could run midday. That's another classic dilemma of these transportation services is they can carry their weight during the commute when they're full, but it's the rest of the day when you need to run them to provide reliable transportation that you have to cross-subsidize with your other runs. In the case of MacDill, they are very focused. Their transit times are very focused on when they go. So by serving that location first, as a proof of concept, if you will, one could avoid having to run those midday runs that certainly wouldn't have enough demand to pay their way, Monday through Friday. That's a view of the boat harbor in MacDill. At MacDill, we're looking east towards Hillsborough County. And this is an example of the trams. Ed talked a little bit about this, door-to-door service, or first mile, last mile. And that's critical. You can't just put a ferry system out there and expect people are going to find their way to it. And then when they get to the other side, you can't expect that they're going to find their way to their final destination. You really have to connect the dots. So the idea on MacDill is to provide trams that would circulate through the base. They would meet the ferries. You can see the way they're configured like a theme park tram is you can quickly get on and off them. So the idea is you can move them quickly instead of funneling everybody through the door. A little harder to follow. You'll see in the lower right there's a star. That's the landing location. That's their small boat harbor. That's where the ferry would land. And then the stars and the red line are potential drop-off pickup points on the tram run. The other aspects is once the equipment and facilities are in place and the commuter service is being operated, and we believe that's the core service or the base service, there are opportunities for other types of service, peak service or specialty excursion service. Those could be trips right here to the Forum. Anytime there's a big game or event from Hillsborough County, those could be trips across the bay to St. Petersburg. Those could be trips next time there's a convention here. So we see that the vessels would be available to provide specialty and peak services, off-peak services. Those would primarily be on the weekends. Certainly they'd be available in the evenings. That's just another graphic of the bay showing kind of the natural configuration. The blue line runs from Hillsborough straight up to Tampa. The green line runs over to MacDill, and that yellow line is all the way across the bay to St. Petersburg. So we're going to talk about phases here in a moment, but a couple of things that I want to talk about is we do a lot of transportation projects with government, and a standard model, one of the key elements that works in these models is when the public owns the facilities. That's pretty standard. The public owns the ports like an airport or a port facility, and they normally own the vessels. Our standard contract is we come in and we operate public facilities for government. We're usually paid to operate, we're paid a fee, and the generation of revenues and the collection of revenues goes to the public. So we don't normally have any kind of risk in something like this. It's a little different. You know, Ed can sell, right? So Ed has sold us on the idea that we would assume the operating risk. And, right. So, but we've modeled it. We believe that by somewhere in the third year, end of the second, into the third year, the project breaks even. And now we can tell you exactly what it costs to run the system. We can't tell you how quickly people will migrate over and use it. That's always the big question in these things. There's all kinds of ways to try to model it, but in the end, it just is what it is. The reason we're confident in proposing this project is we feel that the market, the captured McDill market, is more predictable than, if you will, just an ad hoc market. And we believe that there's enough public support, and we'll see here as in the months ahead, that there will be other opportunities for the vessels to do other work, for other opportunities to generate revenue. So the key point I'm making here is that our company is proposing that we would come in and operate publicly owned facilities, and we would do that under some kind of operating agreement. We think that it's about year 3 before the project breaks even. And we're very, very excited about it. So I'm going to pass it back to Ed, and then I think we're going to open it up to questions.